Hey Dragon Slayers! Today's video is about the location of your fat and its connection to insulin resistance. Now, I know what you're thinking. Didn't we already talk about obesity? How can obesity be the cause of insulin resistance if it's a consequence of insulin resistance? My answer again is it's complicated. Insulin resistance and obesity have a very strong connection. But which comes first is a matter of some debate. There is evidence to support both perspectives. Previously, we explored how high insulin levels lead to the accumulation of body fat. Now it's time to review the evidence on the other, more widely accepted side of the story, on how obesity causes insulin resistance. Location matters. As with real estate, so it is with body fat. It's all about location. We appreciate more than ever that excess body fat is largely relevant only if we store our fat in the wrong place. Where we store our fat is determined largely by our sex, partially by our genetics, and partially by our diets. Typically, we consider two predominant patterns of fat storage, referred to as fat deposition, although there are always exceptions, and some may have the misfortune of having both. The key difference between these two types of fat storage patterns is specific placement of the fat. The gynecoid, which I might be mispronouncing, fat pattern is the result of fat stored beneath the skin, referred to as subcutaneous fat. This pattern is typically fat that is accumulated on the hips and thighs, with less fat on the upper body and trunk. Think of the pear shape typically seen with women due to the actions of estrogen. In contrast, the android pattern may have both subcutaneous and visceral fat, meaning fat inside the trunk of the body surrounding the visceral organs, livers, kidneys, intestines, and heart. So, this is the typical male fat storage pattern, analogous to the apple body shape. Some people with the android pattern store most of their body fat around the middle of their body, the inner tube. If it jiggles, it's okay. The best way to know which is your predominant fat pattern is simply grabbing it. Yep, that's it. Grab it, shake it. If you can grab some fat and shake it, it's subcutaneous fat. This is better. If you can't easily grab it, or your belly is hard but big, it's likely you have more visceral fat, which is far worse and far deadlier. So don't be so quick to curse the jiggly body fat. We might not like how it looks or bulges, but it's better than the alternative. We have long known that women have a better chance of living longer, healthier lives than men. This is partially due to the inherent differences in the impacts these fat deposits have on insulin resistance and the subsequent risk of various chronic diseases. Ultimately, what is so important about these two fat patterns is the likelihood of having excess visceral fat. Study after study has shown that storing fat inside the core of the body is harmful, and we now know that there are differences in how fat behaves when it's stored in the viscera. And because men have a greater likelihood of storing fat there, this in turn is likely why men suffer more health problems with excessive body fat than women do. A series of rodent experiments have established this. When visceral fat from an obese animal is transplanted into a lean animal, the recipient animal becomes insulin resistant immediately. In contrast, when subcutaneous fat is transported into the lean animal, it remains insulin sensitive. Interestingly, these same rules apply to a seemingly lean person. That's right. Even some people who look lean may be insulin resistant because of having more visceral fat. But wait, even lean individuals with insulin resistance are likely fattier than their lean, insulin sensitive counterparts. It's really a matter of whether you see the fat or not. And this is relevant because it emphasizes the most important aspect of obesity and insulin resistance, namely where you are fat. You want to know how you're doing? It's an easy method to determine your fat pattern. It's to compare your girth around your largest part of your belly near the navel. This is the waist measurement, with the largest part around your hips or buttocks. This is the hip measurement. Divide the waist number by the hip number and you get your waist to hip ratio. For example, if my waist is 30 inches and my hips are 40 inches, my waist to hip ratio is 0.75. For men, this number is ideally below 0.9. For women, this number should be below 0.8. Ultimately, the story isn't over. It's not enough to know that excess body fat increases the risk of developing insulin resistance. We need to know how the fat leads to insulin resistance. Excess body fat, especially visceral fat, increases two pathological conditions. It increases inflammation and causes oxidative stress, which we'll examine in greater detail in upcoming videos. That's what I've got for you guys today. Don't forget to like and subscribe because it really helps the channel out. And remember, guys, that together, you and I will slay the dreaded diabetes dragon.